Well, we're in the shop here. It's a little chilly, but we're going to try and make a lined box in a square shape and be able to use it for jewelry, rings, etc., those kinds of things. So one of the first things I'm going to have to do is to prepare some of the wood. I'm going to select some sapele today to make it from, so I have to cut some squares of 5.5-inch square and glue them together to make the main part of the box. I've got a nice piece of sapele here, so I'm going to use the saw and cut off two sections that are going to be 5.5 inches square. Now that I've got the two pieces of sapele ready to go, normally if I was just going to do the project with the bandsaw, I would glue the two of them together and then use blue painter's tape before I attach the pattern. But because I want to use the scroll saw as well, I'm not going to glue them together initially. I'm just going to tape them together with blue painter's tape, making sure that they're lined up. Well, I had to leave yesterday because I had a few things I had to get done. Came back today, it's a little chillier in the shop, so I changed jackets. But what I had done is I had taken and used a spray adhesive and put the pattern onto the two pieces of sapele that I had taped together. Now, before I do any sawing, I'm going to be covering those with some clear packing tape over top of the pattern. The reason that I'm doing that is when I come to do the cutting on the scroll saw, the packing tape kind of lubricates the up and down motion of the blade and saves the blade a little bit. So that's the reason and the rationale behind that. So now that that's done, I'm going to take it over to the bandsaw first of all and cut out the actual pattern itself, and then we'll go from there. So now I have the pattern completely cut out, and we're going to take out the insides very shortly. Now I did this on a 1/4-inch blade on the bandsaw because it gives me some flexibility and allows me to make that curve on the corners. So now I'm going to go back over to the bench and re-tape this again. Now that I've got it retaped, I've set my bandsaw to the fence on it to allow me to cut off the bottom, and I want to take about 1/4 of an inch off the bottom. That will be the bottom of the box, and I will glue that back on at some point later on. There I have the bottom, and I'll set that aside and reattach it later on. And now I want to go over to the drill press and drill the holes that are going to be the entry holes for the blade on the scroll saw. Now it's time to move over to the scroll saw to cut out the interior pieces. Okay, I've got a number, what did I put in there? A number 9 blade that will cut up to 1.5 inches or 2 inches of hardwood. So I'm going to cut out the interior pieces. It started very nicely, but rather than have you watch that whole process, I'll come back once I've cut the interior pieces out. So now that that's finished, we've got 4 inserts taken out, and I can take the tape off, and eventually what I'll do is I'll glue these back together again along with the bottom. And then it's time to make the top. So we'll move on to that next. But first I'm going to glue these 2 pieces back together and clamp it up so it'll be ready for tomorrow. And now it's time to make the lid and lid liner. The way this is going to be together, you'll notice it's right even, so I have to make a liner that'll go on top of this little ridge, 1/2 inch deep, so that it will allow the lid to sit down nicely onto the liner. So I have glued the pattern onto a piece of 1/2 inch birch plywood, and that's what I'm going to use for the lid liner. So I'll go and cut that out now on the scroll saw. Well, I've cut out the lid liner on the scroll saw. Now you take it back over to the box itself, and I'll be taking the patterns off, of course, shortly, but I wanted to check to make sure that it fit. So that fits nicely on top, and that creates a space for the lid to sit down on top of the crossbars that divide the 4 different compartments. So I'm going to glue that all up, and then I'll come back tomorrow and finish it off. Okay, we've got the glue up all done. There's the lid liner, the 2 sides, and the interior. Now it's time to sand it up. So we'll take it over to the sander and we'll give it a good go. Okay, I've got it all sanded up nicely. I'll do a final coat with some 600 grit, kind of smooth it off. Now I've got to put in, I've cut out a lid liner that will fit inside. And then I've cut out the lid that will go on top. So in order to center it properly, I'm going to put some double-sided tape in here and stick it down on top before I glue it. So we'll get that done and we'll do the final sanding, and then we'll put a finish on it. Well, I've got the finish on now. All it was natural Danish oil. Oops, got to get a little sawdust off there. And then I used the flocking kit to put the flocking material inside to coat it. It looks like a felt, but it's better than cutting out felt and trying to glue it because it covers the entire surface. What you do is you coat the inside with shellac and let it dry, and then you put the flocking material, or you put adhesive on top of the shellac after it's dry on all the areas that you want covered. Then you put the flocking material inside the tubes and you squirt it onto the surfaces and let it dry. You let it dry overnight, and then when you tip the thing over the next day, all the excess falls out and you can use it over again. And it's just like having a felt-lined box. And then of course you have the lid, and the lid fits on just like that, and you have the finished piece. So it looks quite nice. And I did another one at the same time. I did a heart-shaped one, which is all finished now too. And it also has the flocking material on the inside. So they're quite easy to do. It just takes a little time and you just have to be patient. But they turn out to be quite a nice feature that you can give away to someone or sell.